Hi, welcome to today's On This Day in Tudor History video. I'm Claire Ridgway. I'm founder of the Tudor Society website and also the Anne Boleyn Files blog. I'm also author of several history books. I'm here every day with Tudor events such as births, deaths, marriages, baptisms, executions quite a lot, battles, all sorts of Tudor goodies for you to enjoy. Now, today's On This Day in Tudor History is the birthday of a man that not a lot of people have heard of, but someone that's actually quite interesting. He led quite an interesting life, but also he has some interesting kind of legends associated with him. It was on this day in Tudor history, the 28th of February 1525, that magnate Gerald Fitzgerald, 11th Earl of Kildare, was born. And he's a man that was also known as the Wizard Earl. That nickname has been used for quite a few historical characters, but he also had that nickname. Now, Gerald was the son of another Gerald, Gerald Fitzgerald, 9th Earl of Kildare, Lord Deputy of Ireland. Now, Fitzgerald actually does mean son of Gerald, Fitz coming from the French fils, son. Now, Gerald Fitzgerald, 9th Earl of Kildare, this Lord Deputy of Ireland, who was our Gerald's father, was married as his second marriage to Elizabeth Grey, who was our Gerald's mother. Now, she was the daughter of Thomas Grey, 1st Marquess of Dorset, and he, in turn, was the eldest son of Elizabeth Woodville and her first husband, Sir John Grey. Now, that's the Elizabeth Woodville who goes on to marry Edward IV, the mother of the princes in the Tower. Now, our Gerald had an interesting life from the age of 9, because it was at the age of 9 in 1534 that he became a fugitive. Now, he became a fugitive because his half-brother, Thomas Fitzgerald, 10th Earl of Kildare, took part in a failed rebellion. The failure of the rebellion led to Gerald becoming a fugitive. Now, this Thomas Fitzgerald, his half-brother, was known as Silken Thomas, and as a result of this failed rebellion, Silken Thomas and 5 of Gerald's uncles were executed as traitors at Tyburn in 1537. And little Gerald, little nine-year-old Gerald, who was suffering from smallpox at the time, so not good timing, ended up having to go on the run. He was first helped by his tutor, then by his paternal aunt, and both of them had a good network of contacts that helped Gerald and put him up in safe houses so that he could, get away from the authorities that were trying to track him down. Now, obviously, with the execution of his half-brother, he became the heir to the earldom of Kildare, but because his half-brother was attainted, had an act of attainder against him, he was a traitor, the earldom was actually abolished by the act of attainder. So Gerald didn't automatically inherit the earldom. In 1540, Gerald fled across the Channel to St. Malo, and he accepted an invitation to visit the French court. Now, he didn't stay long at the French court because France was not wanting to upset England by accommodating this young man, who was, of course, a fugitive. But they did grant him a pension. He went on to the court of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, and Charles V also granted him a pension. And then he moved on to Florence, to the court of Cardinal Reginald Pole. He stayed there for some time, and Cardinal Pole was very kind to him and gave him an absolutely amazing education, a fine Renaissance education. And while he was there, Gerald tried to get French support for restoring the house of Fitzgerald. He tried to persuade, from Florence, he tried to persuade the French to support him, along with military campaigns, to go back to England and Ireland and to restore the house of Fitzgerald. But all of that came to nothing. But then Henry VIII died in January 1547, and things changed for Gerald. In March 1549, he was finally pardoned by Edward Seymour, who of course was Lord Protector of England at this time and Duke of Somerset. And because of him being pardoned, he was able to travel back to England. In 1554, he got married. He married Mabel, daughter of Sir Anthony Browne, and he went on to have 5 children with her. The marriage brought him a very useful ally in his brother-in-law, who was also called Anthony Browne, 1st Viscount Montague, who really helped Gerald establish himself at the English court and helped him to rise in favour. And in 1554, this was in Mary I's Catholic reign, he was created Earl of Kildare and Baron of Offaly. He helped the Queen to suppress Wyatt's rebellion, so that was kind of his reward for helping the Queen. A year later, nearly all of his family's lands that they'd once owned, that of course had been taken when his half-brother had been attainted as a traitor, all of that, nearly all of it, was restored to Gerald. In November 1556, Queen Mary sent him to Ireland at her husband Philip's sort of request, and he began to rebuild his life in Ireland. He rebuilt his home and his network of contacts, and he was able to return to the family seat of Kilkenny Castle. Now, going on to Elizabeth I's reign, Elizabeth I being Protestant, Gerald got into a little bit of trouble, got into trouble twice in Elizabeth's reign, when his enemies attempted to make him a scapegoat for rebellion in the Irish Pale. He was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London both times, but luckily was cleared and released both times. He lived to quite a good age for Tudor times, really. He died at the age of 60 on the 16th of November 1585 in London, and his body was taken back to Ireland, and he was buried at Kildare in February 1586. Now, his biographer David Finnegan gives the following description of Gerald from the Calendar of Carew manuscripts. A perfect horseman and valiant of courage, small of stature and slender of person, a very courteous gentleman, a right courtier. All that belonged to a gentleman was in him, saving he was hard and angry at times. He was a great gatherer of money, and would play, i.e. gamble, much. So that's a description of him. But what I like is the legends, the exciting things that made him the Wizard Earl, the legends that are associated with him, due to his interest in alchemy, which was sparked off by his time in Florence, his fine Renaissance education that he had there. And he was also called the Wizard Earl because he also was said to have dabbled in the dark arts, the occult. And he was even rumoured to have special powers. Now, one legend said that at Kilkenny Castle, when he was there living with his wife Mabel, he was dabbling in the dark arts when Mabel became interested in what he was doing. And he didn't think that she had enough courage to, see what he was doing. So, according to the legend, he set up 3 tests for Mabel to test her courage. And the first one, he sat her in the castle's banqueting hall, and then he used his magic to raise the level of the local river to come and flood the castle. And the water came into the hall, and apparently it went right up to her chin. And she passed that test because she showed no fear at all. So she got through test 1. Test 2, apparently after the waters had receded, a fish-like creature, but with serpent-type movements, wound its body round her feet. But again, she showed no fear and passed test number 2. Then test number 3, which she also passed with flying colours, was Gerald resurrecting someone who'd died many years before. He resurrected them from their tomb, and this shadowy figure flitted around the room and came close to Mabel at times, but again she showed no fear, so she passed all 3 tests with flying colours. But then Gerald decided to change into a small blackbird. And he changed into this bird and he landed on her shoulder. But as Mabel went to stroke the bird on her shoulder, a cat had come into the hall, and the cat was very excited, obviously, by seeing the bird. And it leapt at her shoulder to attack the bird, which of course was Mabel's husband, Gerald. So apparently Mabel stretched out her arm in terror, fearing for the bird. But of course she had showed fear, and the powers dark, as they were called, made her husband and several of his knights disappear just like that in a flash, which doesn't really tie into the fact that he died a natural death and that, because according to this legend, when she did that, the knights and her husband disappeared and were never seen again. Doesn't tie in with the history that we know. Gerald didn't just disappear. And apparently this legend was that they fell under this spell and went to sleep, but that every 7 years the knights and Gerald would return to haunt Kildare Castle in full armour on their trusty chargers. And the castle website says that this happens on the 7th day of the 7th month of the 7th year. So the castle, Kildare Castle, the seat of the Fitzgeralds and where all these dark deeds took place, is now a hotel and a golf resort. So you can spend a night in the castle, but just watch out for the Earl and his knights on their chargers if you're there on the 7th day of the 7th month of the 7th year. So there you go. That's the story of Gerald Fitzgerald, 11th Earl of Kildare, who was born on this day in 1525, the Wizard Earl who dabbled in the dark arts. Now, there isn't a 29th of February this year because it isn't a leap year, but I am conscious of the fact that some of you out there will have been born on the 29th of February. So even though you might celebrate it on the 28th or on the 1st of March, I thought you might like to know an event that actually took place on the 29th of February in Tudor times. So I'm going to read out the entry for the 29th of February from my book on this day in Tudor history. And this is actually something that happened in Scotland in the Tudor period. So not Tudor in that aspect, in that it happened in Scotland, but it happened in what we call the Tudor period. So, the burning of Patrick Hamilton, theologian and Scotland's first Protestant martyr, took place on this day in 1528 outside St Salvator's College in St Andrews. It was a horrific death, with it taking around 6 hours for Hamilton to die. You know, burning was not a good way to go. I mean, if your sentence got commuted to beheading, it really was merciful. Alexander Elysius wrote of how Hamilton was roasted rather than burned. Hamilton was condemned as a heretic after being found guilty of 13 charges, 7 of which were to do with doctrines from Philip Melanchthon's work. Now, I'm going to do Latin here. My Latin isn't great, so please bear with me. Philip Melanchthon's Loci communes rerum theologicarum seu hypotyposis theologicae. I don't know whether I'd said that at all. John Knox recorded Hamilton's awful death. The innocent servant of God, being bound to the stake in the midst of coals, some timber and other matter appointed for the fire, a train of powder was made and set alight, but although it scorched his left hand and that side of his face, it neither kindled the wood nor yet the coals. And so remained the appointed to death in torment, till men ran to the castle again for more powder and more wood for the fire, which, being at last kindled, with a loud voice he cried, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. How long shall darkness overwhelm this realm? And how long wilt thou suffer this tyranny of men? The fire was slow, and therefore was his torment the more. But most of all was he grieved by certain wicked men, amongst them Campbell the Black Friar, who continually cried, Convert, heretic! Call upon Our Lady! Say Salvi Regina, etc. To whom he answered, Depart, and trouble me not, ye messengers of Satan. But will that the foresaid friar still roared one thing with great vehemence. He said unto him, Wicked man, thou knowest the contrary, and the contrary to me that thou hast confessed. I appeal thee before the tribunal seat of Jesus Christ. After which, and other words which could not be understood or marked both for the tumult and vehemence of the fire, the witness of Jesus Christ gained victory after long sufferance, the last of February in the year of God, 1528. So that was the horrific end of Patrick Hamilton, theologian, who has gone down in history as Scotland's first Protestant martyr. So thank you for joining me for this on this day in Tudor history, even though this day actually doesn't exist in 2019. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. I will see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.